Disclaimer, everything you're about to hear in this video reflects my personal interpretation of what was shown on Exchange 4. These are opinions, not statements of fact.
진심을 현지한테 모두 쏟아내는 상황이었다면 그래도 너도 끝까지 노력할 거야?
Was Yooshik ever actually choosing between two women, or choosing between safety and truth? Episode 18 of Exchange 4 wasn't actually about dates, jealousy, or even love triangles. It was about one sentence that stopped Yooshik cold. And that sentence was from Minkhyung. "When I leave here, I'll never see you again." That wasn't a threat. That wasn't manipulation. That was finality. And for the first time this season, Yooshik had to face what he'd been avoiding. Not choosing between two women, but choosing whether he was willing to lose one forever. When I started this show, the person I found the hardest to relate to was Minkhyung. She felt guarded and emotionally inconsistent. But by episode 18, she became the most relatable and honest person in the house. Not calm, not composed, but bold and very honest. And that honesty is what made this episode so uncomfortable for many fans to watch. Actually, everyone in that house is playing some kind of game except Woojin, Minkhyung and Yooshik. And wow! This episode had me locked in. I thoroughly and genuinely enjoyed it, even though there were moments I nearly shattered my screen because of Yooshik. Funny enough, by the end, I almost wanted to hug the same screen because of him. Let's rewind to the illusion everyone keeps falling for. On the surface, Yooshik and Hyunji's unofficial date looks sweet. The cafe banter, them admiring their rings, talking about it, the hand brushing and their shy smiles. It's cute. But those gestures never land emotionally. There's no deep pull, no weight behind it, no spark. What we see instead is performance. Two people doing what dating shows expect them to do. Hyunji leans into touch. Yooshik responds attentively, almost instinctively, caught up in the moment more than a deeper current. It's polite, careful, reactive, he's present, but not truly pulled in, almost like he's living in the illusion of falling in love without actually falling in love, if that makes sense. This is why I don't feel butterflies when I watch Yooshik and Hyunji. And I promise you all, these are my honest, objective opinions about this episode, no bias at all. Hi guys, and Happy New Year. It's your girl Funnel Pop. Make sure you watch this video till the very end to catch every little detail that unraveled in this episode, and see why some of the takes going around don't fully line up with what actually happened on the show. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. You can also check out the shop button on this video for discounted products. It helps support the channel through commission. As always, thank you so much for the support. I never take it for granted. When Yooshik is with Hyunji, he speaks in the present tense. When he's with Minkhyung, he speaks in terms of consequences. That difference defines the entire episode. Minkhyung spent 5 hours waiting while Yooshik was out with another woman. That alone would break most people, but what pushes her over the edge isn't jealousy. It's betrayal. She uses that word repeatedly, and I think viewers sometimes dismiss it because they don't fully see where it's coming from. Betrayal doesn't come from competition. It comes from broken expectations. You know, with Yooshik and Hyunji, maybe their hearts really are fluttering in real time, but honestly, I don't feel it through the screen. It feels like Yooshik is moving out of a sense of duty to the show. I'm not saying he has no feelings for Hyunji, he clearly does, but the energy feels more competitive than genuinely romantic. As for Hyunji, I understand why the spark doesn't land for me either. She acts like she's falling in love, but it feels more like she's trying to stay afloat. Initially, her feelings were clearly with her ex, Baekhyun. The problem is, Baekhyun never came to her directly and said he wanted to get back together. Even when she expressed her emotions, he never gave a clear answer. That hesitation came to a head during their argument on the terrace in Japan. He kept asking whether she wanted to get back together, and she hesitated, not because she didn't care, but because she wanted to feel chosen. Meanwhile, he was holding back. That day, both of them paused their feelings. Still, there's something undeniably real between Baekhyun and Hyunji. When they look at each other, you can sense the connection. That spark exists there. With Yooshik, it doesn't. No matter how cute or shy Hyunji acts around Yooshik, I don't get the sense that she's falling for him in the same way. She cares about him, he's kind, attentive, and safe, but it feels performative, almost like she's keeping him as an option rather than being pulled toward him. On the beach, their moments are sweet on the surface, but I feel forced tension and forced skinship. She knows Yooshik is interested, so she leans in, flutters, and acts cute, but it comes across more as a way to hold his attention than a natural romantic pull. From my perspective, Hyunji came on this show open to reuniting with Baekhyun. When that door didn't fully open because he wasn't actively pursuing her, she turned to Yooshik. At the same time, her interest in Song-young has been fading, he hasn't shown enough to move her emotionally, and the only real edge he offers is marriage. She already knows Song-young would choose her. So her energy shifts toward maintaining Yooshik's interest as another viable option. In the end, it feels less like romance and more like competition, specifically, competing with Minkhyung for Yooshik. That's why I feel she lacks compassion for Minkhyung. Historically, on this show, women who fall for someone else's partner still show awareness or empathy for the acts of the person they're interested in. From what we've seen so far, Hyunji doesn't show much of that, and personally, that's not an energy I'd feel comfortable navigating in a friendship with. Now, about Minkhyung, she waited all day for Yooshik and Hyunji to return from their unofficial date for 5 hours. She became anxious, went to Hyunji's room to check on their return, trying to gauge when Yooshik would be back. That sets the stage for the tension we see later, and why her emotions in this episode hit so hard. Guys, if you've never dated a player, you'll never fully understand what Minkhyung is going through. This is exactly what it feels like to Minkhyung, to watch someone like Yooshik dating and supposedly fall for another woman right in front of her eyes. It feels like your ass is literally on fire. It's disappointing how many viewers, who've never been in her shoes, criticize her simply for being human. The reason why this situation hits her so hard has been a mystery for many, but I noticed some cracks in her conversation with Yooshik that revealed why she's so angry, and Yooshik knows it too. That's why he can't confidently tell her he wants to break up completely. This ties back to her constantly saying she feels betrayed, which I'll break down shortly. So, Minkhyung waited in Hyunji's room and quickly left as soon as Hyunji came in, laughing my ass off. I just love how bold she is. I call her small but mighty, hahaha. So, she met Yooshik and this is where the drama begins. Yooshik asks her, "Would you be okay if I still get back with you, even though I have feelings for someone else? Wouldn't that hurt more?" And she responds, "Okay, so are you throwing me away?" He says no, that's not how he's thinking. Then she asks, "Do you think your feelings might change?" And he answers, "I don't know." Now, here's where I have a problem with Yooshik and almost broke my screen. I was like, hey. He should have immediately said, "My feelings will not change." Instead, he says, "I don't know," leaving everything hanging. Another key moment in this conversation is when Minkhyung says she feels betrayed. And I kept thinking, there's probably a deeper issue here, maybe an agreement or expectation they had before coming on the show. Even one of the MCs at some point noted that there's something deeper between the two of them that we don't know about. She might have assumed he would pursue her wholeheartedly, but once on the show, he flipped, so she felt blindsided. Let's imagine hypothetically, they had a conversation before filming, something like, "When we get to the show, I'll pursue you fully." She trusted that, entered the show expecting him to follow through, and yet he changed course. That may be why she feels betrayed, and this isn't the first time she's said it. In this episode alone, she said it twice. At one point, she even tells him not to go out with Hyunji again, fearing his feelings for her would grow. He promises he won't, and from there, she's relieved, even calling the day a day of healing during dinner. Before that, in the kitchen, he was grilling meat and feeding her. Hyunji got jealous just seeing that, so imagine what Minkhyung feels. Her ex is dating another woman in her presence, and she hasn't fully let go yet. On top of all this, production made things unnecessarily messy. They told members to text who they wanted to go on a date with, saying only matches could actually date, but they wouldn't let anyone match with their exes. I get it. Last year, fans complained that all the exes got back together at the end, so this year, the show is trying to make it harder to reunite, but it made Minkhyung's experience even more frustrating and painful. But hey, I love drama, so I'm not gonna complain too much. Anyway, back in Minkhyung's room, she's chatting with Jiyeon and Yoon when Yoon asks, "What if Yooshik and Hyunji match again? What would you do?" Minkhyung says she trusts him. He promised he wouldn't go on a date with Hyunji again. Then boom, messy-ass production sends a public text to everyone showing who matched for dates lol. Almost everyone matches, including Yooshik and Hyunji. The fear on Yoon and Jiyeon's faces is instant. They look straight at Minkhyung, worried and panicked. She's the only woman left behind without a match. A lot of people criticize Minkhyung for choosing Woojin, arguing that she was unfairly banking on Yooshik not choosing Hyunji. But that ignores what Minkhyung herself explained to the other women. She chose Woojin knowing he wasn't going to choose her. She said it plainly. The expectation she did have wasn't about Woojin, it was about Yooshik, who had promised he wouldn't keep going out with Hyunji. That distinction matters. So, as expected, she immediately gets up to confront Yooshik. Think about it, she had been the happiest all night, and in an instant, her mood flipped completely. I felt so sorry for her. Before we get back to Minkhyung's confrontation, in the men's room, Wonkyoo, Woojin, Yooshik, and Songyoung are chatting before the next day's match dates are announced. Wonkyoo asks Yooshik if he'd reconsider reuniting with Minkhyung if she told him she understands his feelings about not wanting to marry now. Yooshik cleverly dodges, saying he's too young and isn't thinking about marriage. But the insane twist here is this, Minkhyung is also young, she isn't asking him about marriage now, she is just thinking about their future together. But Yooshik has already confessed to all the men, including Songyoung, that marriage isn't on his radar anytime soon, even though Hyunji is at a marriageable age. Then comes the knock, Minkhyung's hard-determined knock on the door, right after the match dates text went out. As soon as Yooshik hears it, he nervously puts his knuckle in his mouth, like, my guy knows he's doomed, ha 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 ha. Yooshik telling Minkhyung he's more drawn to Hyunji because he sees her as honest about her feelings toward him had me thinking. Hearing that, I couldn't help but question it. From my perspective, it feels less like honesty and more like desperation, like she's holding on because she doesn't have many options left. At times, it even feels overplayed rather than natural. But the interesting part is that Yooshik is falling for it. This is the same Hyunji who told Jaehyung she could finish 2 bottles of soju but pretended she couldn't, in front of the others. Even her exes, Baekhyun and Songyoung, confirmed she's good at drinking, that even Yooshik looked dumbfounded, but then, Hyunji just smiled and explained she doesn't drink much these days for a reason, and Songyoung looked stunned and was like, really? Guys, I almost died laughing. When she said that, Yooshik gave a proud smile. I guess she was probably implying he had a positive impact on her, so she cut back on drinking, lol. Anyway, back to the conversation between Minkhyung and Yooshik. The turning point between Yooshik and Minkhyung isn't when they raise their voices or cry. It's when the conversation stops moving forward and starts looping. From the very beginning, it's clear they didn't enter the show emotionally equal. Yooshik cried during their preliminary meeting, while Minkhyung smiled. That imbalance never resolved. Somewhere along the way, Yooshik shifted the rules without telling her. That's why she keeps asking the same questions in different ways. what did I do wrong? Why did you pick her? Why do you keep giving me hope? This isn't manipulation. It's someone trying to locate the moment everything fell apart. And Yooshik's responses are where the real story lives. He never says, I don't want you. He never says, I won't choose you. Instead, he says things like, I don't know, I need time, or, what do you want me to give up? These aren't cruelty, they're avoidance. Avoidance that speaks louder than any words could. When Minkhyung says, all I wanted was for you to care about me a little more, instead of responding to that, Yooshik reframes care as time and time as sacrifice. Not misunderstanding, not manipulation, but deflection. Yooshik is good at deflecting. It allows him to stay morally intact without actually changing anything. The moment everything shifts and hope starts rising for Minkhyung was that moment outside. When Minkhyung walks away crying and Yooshik follows her, that choice alone tells us something important. He doesn't disengage. He doesn't shut down. He pulls her away from the rain, he goes to get tissues and comes back. That's not performative. That's instinctive. And then she says the sentence that truly shakes him and flipped their whole dynamic completely. Minkhyung said, once we leave here, I'll never see you again. I refuse to see you. Will that be okay? Seriously, I agree with every word she said in that scene. Many criticized her for being too aggressive, saying she was threatening Yooshik when she said he'd never see her again if he chose Hyunji, but I was clapping for her. Her boldness should be applauded. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in Yooshik's eyes. That moment brought him back to reality, that he could really lose her. The change in his expression was instant, almost like a punch in his face. The fear on his face isn't confusion, and it's not guilt. It's dread. Fear of permanence and of consequences. It's the sudden realization of finality. Up until that moment, everything was still theoretical. The show, the choices, the rules. But that sentence makes it real. He pulls her closer, not reflexively, but intentionally. You don't do that when someone means nothing to you. And when she asks, what did I do so wrong, he doesn't have an answer because there isn't one. He keeps saying it, over and over, you didn't do anything wrong. This is the value of Minkhyung's repetitive questioning. It forces Yooshik to confront the weight of his choices. When she asks, what did I do so wrong that you fell for someone else so easily? His answer is telling. He said, that's what you think. But it's not true. If he had truly fallen for Hyunji easily, the answer would have been simple. But he didn't. He drifted. That line matters, because from that moment on, this conversation isn't about choosing someone else. It's about whether 9 years can be emotionally invalidated in a matter of 6 to 9 days. What's important here is what he doesn't say. He never tells her he doesn't like her. He never tells her to go away. When she begs him to say it plainly, he says, we were together for 9 years. Do you think I can say that so easily? That's one of the clearest lines in the episode. It tells us that whatever he's doing now, he hasn't emotionally erased her. The marriage conversation is another key moment. When Minkhyung asks whether he's talked about marriage with Hyunji, he responds with, am I here to get married? Guys! I screamed. This was the moment Yooshik's action, what he said, and how he said it, made me feel like hugging my screen. That's not deflection. That's grounding. He's pushing back against the idea that his current connection automatically equals long-term certainty. And this matters, because in the house, Yooshik is being portrayed as someone whose feelings are growing quickly. But his own words suggest hesitation, not acceleration. When Minkhyung asks if he's ever imagined a future with her and he says yes, the problem isn't that he lied before. The problem is that he didn't know how to speak about uncertainty without hurting her. He even says it outright. He was afraid of promising something that might never happen and hurting her more later. That's clearly not romantic. It's cautious. Maybe even emotionally immature, but it's honest. Their second conversation inside the room is where things start to collapse. Not because Minkhyung is wrong for being hurt, but because the conversation turns into emotional circling. She keeps asking why he chose Hyunji after saying he wouldn't. He apologizes. He admits that if he were allowed to choose her, he would have. And that's not nothing. That's a confession. But it's also a boundary, because he still doesn't act on it. By this point, Yooshik is visibly drained. You can see it in his body language. He stops leaning forward. He looks away more often. He sighs deeply and keeps swinging his head back. And when Minkhyung says, "If you let go of my hand, it's really over," his expression changes again, but this time it's different from earlier. This isn't fear. It's resignation. It's the look of someone realizing that no matter what he says, he can't undo her pain. That's not a man choosing another woman. That's a man realizing he might lose the one person who still sees him clearly. When she says she wants him to be sorry for the rest of his life, that isn't malice. That's grief talking. She's trying to reclaim power in a moment where she feels completely disposable. But it's also the moment where whatever emotional reopening existed collapses under exhaustion. Now let's talk about Hyunji's late-night visit, because this moment gets romanticized a lot, and context really matters. When Yooshik heard the knock on the door, I genuinely don't think he believed it was Minkhyung. Her knocks have always been emotionally charged, urgent, almost unmistakable. This one wasn't. So he got up, took a look outside, and that's when he noticed Hyunji, who had actually gone to knock on Song-young's door first. What confused me was what happened next. The moment Song-young opened his door, she suddenly bent over and rushed into Yooshik's room trying to hide from Song-young, like she didn't just leave his room. That shift was super confusing to me. At that point, I found myself asking, what exactly was she trying to accomplish? She had spent most of the night with Song-young, at times, touching him, complimenting him, smiling at him, until Yooshik passed by and her expression changed. Saying she didn't want Yooshik to get the wrong idea, and that sudden shift felt awkward. This is the same Song-young she had even been confiding in about her worries surrounding Yooshik all through that night, but suddenly, she's running from him. It felt so uncomfortable to watch. Because suddenly, Song-young became the weird guy. Meanwhile, Song-young had rushed over to ask about Jae-hyung, whom Hyunji had been asking him about just before Yooshik's door opened. Her urgency to swoop into Yooshik's room in that way felt off. So, she squeezed herself into Yooshik's room, and when Hyunji slips inside, it doesn't feel like comfort. It feels like control. Not malicious, but strategic. She senses instability in her connection with Yooshik because of Minkhyung's interference that day, so I guess she had to make moves to secure her position. Whether intentional or not, the result is a very tense, intimate situation created at a time when Yooshik is already emotionally exhausted and vulnerable over his ex. The room is dark, the distance between them is close, and the interaction relies more on silence and physical proximity than actual conversation. Then there's the ring. When she lifted her finger, it didn't read as casual at all. To me, it felt intentional and symbolic. Almost like a quiet reminder, letting him know, I still have your ring. I'm taking this seriously. Don't let your ex sway you. That moment carried more meaning than anything that was verbally said. And when Yooshik pats her head, that's the first time I feel something shift between them. But it isn't a spark or the feeling of people falling in love. It's sexual tension. Physical attraction without emotional depth. And that distinction matters, because tension can pull someone in short term, but it doesn't always hold once things settle. That's why it doesn't feel lasting. So where does this leave us? Did Yooshik think about getting back with Minkhyung during this episode? Absolutely, yes. Not as a decision, but as a possibility he tried to suppress. Now, would that thought have survived if Minkhyung hadn't pushed him so hard? Probably not. He would have drifted forward, unresolved and untouched. And that's the key. Minkhyung didn't create doubt. She exposed it. Because Yooshik's thought in this episode wasn't, I want Minkhyung back. It was, I might lose her forever, and I'm not sure I'm okay with that. And those are two very different thoughts. The reason I don't think that thought would have survived on its own comes down to Yooshik's emotional pattern throughout the season, which is avoidance through movement. When things get uncomfortable, he shifts his attention to the next person, reframes emotions as timing or circumstances, and delays decisions until the pressure fades. Hyunji made that easy for him. She didn't demand clarity. She didn't force retrospection. She stayed in the present. So without Minkhyung pressing him, Yooshik would have continued dating Hyunji, told himself the past was already decided, and never fully examined whether he was actually done with Minkhyung or not. Minkhyung's pushing, the repeated questions, emotional breakdowns, and refusal to accept vague answers, blocked his escape route. She forced him to confront permanence, like, we'll never see each other again, responsibility, that his actions didn't just hurt but ended something, and ownership, because he couldn't hide behind confusion anymore. Now, in the preview for episode 19, when Baekhyun asks whether Yooshik would stop pursuing Hyunji if he stepped in and started pursuing her, Yooshik appears to hesitate before answering. Up until now, Yooshik has been driven by competition, but he's felt comfortable because he never saw Baekhyun as a real competitor. He's going on another date with her, and it's likely his feelings will deepen, especially after her late-night moves by his closet. So, I don't expect him to verbally admit giving up during the truth or drink game. It's likely he'll deflect the question, but, if he feels threatened by Baekhyun, I have a strong feeling he might give up, especially if Hyunji shows him she's getting confused. As for my prediction, I don't think Yooshik's final choice, whoever it is, will be as emotionally decisive as viewers expect. If he chooses Hyunji, it won't be because his feelings are deeper. It will be because moving forward feels safer than reopening the past. And if that happens, I'm not convinced their relationship would last long-term. If he were to choose Minkhyung, it would require a level of emotional clarity and accountability he hasn't shown yet. And even then, there's no guarantee she could trust him again without resentment. So my real prediction is this: Yooshik may choose someone in the end, but he hasn't fully chosen himself yet. And until that happens, any final couple will be standing on unresolved ground. That's why episode 18 doesn't feel romantic. It feels unfinished. Not a triangle, but a reckoning. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thank you so much for watching and for supporting the channel. I'll see you in the next video.